Okay, everybody, I guess we'll get started. I'm Steve McMillan. Thank y'all for having me tonight. I've actually never been to a Master Gardener's meeting and been working with grass and fertilizer and golf courses for my whole career, so kind of interested to be here tonight. But to tell you a little bit about myself, we're going to talk about weed control in home lawns. But I was a kid that grew up mowing the yard down the street. Moved up here to Abilene in the early 90s, was the golf course superintendent at Abilene Country Club for 25 years. And then left the golf business 8 years ago, and now I've got a little fertilizer and weed control business. So I've had the opportunity to see a lot of weeds and deal with a lot of weed issues. And what I want to kind of, obvious things tonight, if y'all are looking for an in particular weed identification or a particular product or any questions along the way, feel free to ask. But I'd like to kind of start with kind of a different viewpoint on why we have weeds and why we're always dealing with weed issues. Because as I started thinking about this talk today, when I first got in the golf business years ago, one of the old golf course superintendents that I respected a lot, I was always asking him questions, and he said, if all you ever do is spray weeds, that's all you're ever going to do. And I started, you start thinking about this, like, well, what can we do to avoid ever having the weed issue to start with? So we will get to talking about weeds and a little bit of identification and some products, but I really wanted to spend a little time talking about why we even have weeds. So the first question, we learned this back in college, what is a weed? It kind of sounds silly, but it's any plant growing where we don't want it to grow. One way to not have any weeds is just say that I like that look right there, and you don't have any. And really it's true, and there's a lot of different levels of that. Of course, a lot of my experience for most of my careers on the golf course, average golf course, you have 150 acres, and out of that 150 acres, you have 3 acres of bent grass greens, and 147 acres of Bermuda grass. Well, as soon as that Bermuda grass crosses that line, now it's a weed. So it's really all in your expectations as to what is the answer to that question, what is a weed? Oops, I may have. A weed is just anything growing anywhere where we don't want it to grow. The easy weeds, broadleaf weeds, there's kind of 2 big plant families. You guys probably know a lot of this if you're into the gardening thing, but so broadleaf, any kind of broadleaf plant's called a dicot. Broadleaf weeds grown in a home lawn, very easy chemically to take out because they're totally different plants. And the same thing goes in reverse in flower beds. Actually taking grass out of a flower bed is not too difficult, but taking broadleaves out of a flower bed is very difficult. But an example right here on the left, just a little, and I'm bad about not taking pictures, so I'll just say that I robbed all these pictures off the internet. But a big issue, and we'll talk about it a little more later, but Bermuda grass growing in flower beds is really not a big problem. There's some good products to take Bermuda grass right out of a plant. But then you get a little bit more picky. Here we've got a picture of St. Augustine mixed with Bermuda. It's really not a bad look. I mean, from a distance, I would imagine this lawn looks really great. But if we just want that beautiful uniform look of one single grass, then one of these 2 plants in this picture is a weed. Then the question is, which one? So why do we have weeds? First off, nature always wants to grow something. I think that's a big part of why flower beds are so challenging, is unless you have just a lot of ground cover and total coverage with plants, Mother Nature wants to grow something in an open space. But monostands do not really, or rarely, I should have said rarely occur in nature. We want that beautiful lawn that's all Bermuda grass or all St. Augustine, and that's just not natural, so Mother Nature wants to, just kind of paint a picture of what we're up against having weeds here. Many plants we're trying to grow are not well suited for our area. You guys, I'm sure, know way more about beds and shrubs and flowers than I do, but that's where it's really tough. I mean, plant selection for aesthetics and flower beds in Abilene, we're really limited on what does well here. But even in the lawns, hope I don't totally make anybody mad with this statement, but I'm to the point here in Abilene, you know, St. Augustine used to be our go-to grass anytime we had a shade issue. And I'm to the point with so many issues with St. Augustine's, and they all go back to our water usage or lack of ability to use water. I don't ever recommend St. Augustine Abilene anymore because it's going to have problems. It's not a matter of if, it's just when. Another reason why we have weeds is something's damaged our plants that we're trying to grow. You know, we've been out kind of getting our season started already. We're seeing a lot of lawns right now with thin areas of turf. Lots of weeds are starting to come in here in the springtime, and that was all drought stress from last summer. So, you know, a lot of times something has damaged that plant, you know, months beforehand, trying to figure out what's damaged it. But drought stress, winter damage, insects, you know, lots and lots of reasons. But anytime your plants aren't healthy, you're going to have weeds. Anytime you're trying to grow a plant that doesn't grow well in our area and it's not thriving, you're going to have weeds. So, you know, lots and lots of reasons. External factors, today's a great example, wind, you know, bringing in the weed seeds. Something that I didn't really realize until getting in the business I'm in now, corner houses, if you happen to live on a corner, there is no doubt you have more weed pressure than someone that just lives on the straight street down the block, because the wind's always whipping around that corner. I kind of started seeing that a couple years ago, but paid a lot of attention to it the last 4 or 5 years, and there's no doubt corner houses, no matter which way the wind's blowing, they're having weeds blown into their lawn from somewhere. And then more reasons, you know, kind of painting the picture here. It's amazing that, you know, that we even strive to have a weed-free lawn, but our climate, another biggie is shade problems. You know, we all plant trees. You blink your eyes, 10 or 15 years go by. The trees are big, and now you don't have enough sunlight under the trees to grow any grass. And if you've got thin grass, you'll see a lot of lawns, especially in the established areas of the neighborhood or established areas of Abilene, where you'll see a lot of weeds underneath the trees, and that's just because the grass isn't as thick up underneath those trees. Too wet, too dry, compaction, poor plant selection. Cultural practices are another big one. You know, how often are you mowing the yard? How high, how tall are you mowing the yard? A biggie that I see that puts grass under a lot of stress is if you let your grass get really tall and chop it down really low, that is extremely stressful to grass. That's just one more stress that's going to have that grass not as thick and not quite as healthy as it would have been. So is it really realistic to expect we never have weeds? Probably not realistic to expect we don't have any, but you know, we can certainly do some things to reduce the amount of weeds that we have. Uh-oh. Oh, that got a little messed up on that slide. Prevention strategies. So, biggest thing, when you have this opportunity, and a lot of us don't, but site preparation before we plant. I cannot stress enough spending a little extra effort and a little or even a lot of extra money when you're putting in a lawn or putting in a garden, it pays dividends forever in that area. Example I think about a lot of time on site preparation. When I was at the country club, probably 10 or 15 years, we built countless flower beds. And we were always using our native soil, and we'd put a little sand or a little peat moss or a little something with it to try to build these beds. But we always struggled to grow our plants in the flower beds. And finally, towards the end of my days at the country club, we did a flower bed, and we dug that bed out 12 inches deep and brought in a good composted soil and planted our plants. And we planted everything, and it took off. It thrived. There were a bunch of crepe myrtles in this bed. We didn't even have aphid issues in the crepe myrtles in the fall. They bloom. They're beautiful all year. So, I mean, when and if you ever have the opportunity to build a new bed or put in a new lawn, whatever it is you may be doing, good planning, good plant selection, but really That's your one chance to get ahead of the game. And then if you're like the rest of us, if you're dealing with what you've already got, you just do the best you can. But site preparation, how much time and expense will I budget for my yard? You know, this is a big one that I see, especially a lot of the new subdivisions going in further out south of town towards Tuscola. People building houses and they're on a 1 acre lot and they put in a half acre or 3/4 acre lawn. And then all of a sudden they realize, dang, it's costing me $300 to mow my yard every week, and my water bill's $2,000 a month. And then you have guys like us on the fertilizer and weed control side. So, you know, really think about that. How much effort do you want to put into it? Everybody wants to have a nice lawn, but when it really comes down to the expense and the effort, how much do you want to spend on it? I kind of talked about that a little bit already, taking the time and effort before you plant. Choosing the best plants, you know, this is a biggie. Again, when you get to the beds, you guys probably know more than I know on best plant selection. But when it comes to the lawn side, unless you're dealing with shade issues, go with Bermuda grass. Bermuda is the best adapted, best suited for our part of the world. I have a lot of folks that really don't like Bermuda, but I'm just telling you, there's just less problems with the Bermuda than any others. I kind of mentioned before, I've gotten away from recommending St. Augustine ever. The replacement for St. Augustine, in my opinion, is called zoysia grass. Zoysia is just as shade tolerant as St. Augustine and uses about half as much water. In my opinion, it doesn't have as many fungus issues. It is the big negative to the zoysia grass is it's more expensive, and the reason for that is, let's say if I was a Bermuda grass farmer or a sod grass or a St. Augustine sod farm, I can usually get about 2 crops a year off of my sod farm. Zoysia grass, I'm lucky if I get 1 a year. So it's a supply and demand thing with the zoysia grass, but it is just basically if you're dealing with shade.
Quick question on the Bermuda. Do you recommend common Bermuda or any of the
I'm
offshoots?
glad you asked, because I meant to bring that up. I definitely recommend hybrid Bermuda, which will have to be sodded. In the Bermuda grass family, not all Bermudas are the same, but the 2 big differences are you've got common Bermudas, which are seeded. There are some decent common Bermudas, but as a rule of thumb, common Bermuda is not going to have the dark green color or the density that a hybrid Bermuda will have. The hybrids, there are no seed for hybrids. They do have to be sodded. Another benefit of the hybrids are they are more shade tolerant. The way I think about the shade issues, and that kind of ties right in with where I was going with even the zoysia. Common Bermuda grass, you've got to have all day sunlight. If you have any type of shade at all, you're probably not going to grow common Bermuda long term. Hybrid Bermudas, I think, are good to about 4 hours of sunlight per day. One variety that I really like of the hybrids is called Tiff Tough. There's a lot of them out there we've seen. And they're you know, it's just they're finding a better way to sell us stuff every year, and a lot of times there's not a big difference. But, and by the way, a lot of this information is just my opinion, so, but I really like the Tiff Tough. Celebration was the first one we saw come out, and it had done fantastic. Something has changed with the Celebration sod that we're seeing. It's not the same quality that we were seeing 10 or 15 years ago. There's several Bermuda grasses out from Oklahoma State University. They'll all be called Latitude 36 or some kind of name with the latitude in the wording. They haven't been the greatest around here either, but the Tiff Tough, the Tiff Grand, those are probably my favorite ones that we've been seeing. But as far as back to the shade issue, and by the way, this is in the 8 years since I left the golf business, shade is the #1 issue that I encounter with homeowners growing a thick lawn. You'd think it might be water or how much can you water, or whatever, but it's undoubtedly shade. So Bermuda grass, hybrid Bermuda, I think you're good down to about 4 hours of sunlight a day. Zoysia grass, I really think you're only good to about 3. So you're really only gaining another hour. Now, I see examples of zoysia grass, and even Bermuda in some cases, but zoysia grass growing where I swear it should not be able to survive, like it's just not getting any sunlight. But I guarantee you, if I were to go buy zoysia grass and plant it in my yard with that much shade, it wouldn't make it. I mean, it's just, there's always an exception to the rule. Same thing with magnolia trees, Everybody wants to go plant a magnolia tree because they saw that one big, beautiful magnolia that grows down on Sells Boulevard. But my saying is, for every 100 magnolia trees that have been planted in Abilene, only 1 has survived. But there are exceptions to the rule. On the shade subject, though, and like I said, this is without a doubt the biggest challenge that we see for our homeowners. If you're borderline on growing any grass because of a shade problem, and if the shade problem is from a tree, it's going to get worse. So if you're borderline, find another answer. And what those other answers are is, and no one wants to hear this, probably in this room, but get rid of the shade problem, or at least thin some, remove some trees and lift some branches. You can do a lot of good just by raising the canopy and getting some sunlight underneath there. But the trees are going to get bigger and bigger every year, and like I said, again, you blink your eyes and another 5 or 10 years goes by, and now what was borderline, you're not able to grow it. I actually had a customer probably 5 or 6 years ago that we were talking about his shade issues, and he said, I want to grow Bermuda grass, and I want my trees, and that's that. And I said, well, you have to pick one or the other. And I was like, and usually people pick the trees. People don't normally want to remove a tree. And he actually found a solution that I had not thought of. Because I was explaining to him, when you plant grass in a shady area, it doesn't die immediately. It's going to grow for 3 to 5 years, and slowly, it's not really going to grow, but it's going to sit there for 3 to 5 years. But after about 3 years, it's just going to slowly fizzle away. So this homeowner said, so you're saying if I were to resod my yard every 3 years, I could always have a nice looking yard. He solved his problem, and that's what he does. So again, whatever's in your budget and whatever there's no right or wrong answer. He found a solution to have the beautiful, majestic, 100-year live oaks and grow grass underneath them. Just replace it anytime it looks bad. So he's the only one I've ever seen do that, but it is an answer. And then back on site preparation, just like I said, back to your maintenance practices. Mowing, irrigation, fertilizing. We'll talk a little bit about mowing and irrigation. Let's check our time. So mowing's a big one. Coming from the golf side especially, and hybrid Bermudas, that's what we grow on the golf courses, fairways, tee boxes. You can take hybrid Bermuda down with the right type of mowing equipment down to about 1/2 inch, and it's beautiful. And I have customers constantly asking me about real mowing their lawns. And probably had, I'm going to say 70 to 100 customers try real mowing, and I've only seen 3 of them make it more than 2 years. Because it's just a lot. The shorter you mow the grass, the more often you need to mow the grass. As a rule of thumb, we would like to not cut more than 1/3 of the total height of the grass. So if I'm mowing at 3 inches and I let it grow up to 4 inches, it's time to mow the yard. The lower we go, the more often we have to mow. The example I give with that is, again, back to the golf course. On the golf course, we mow the grass at 1/8 of an inch. So we have to mow every day. That's why you see those guys out there mowing all the time. So it's kind of backwards of what you'd think. A lot of people think, well, I'm just let it get real tall and then chop it down low so I don't have to mow very often. And that's okay too if your priority is reducing work and you're not worried about having a healthy lawn. But if you're letting it get up tall and chopping it down, that's very stressful. Irrigation is the biggie, or has been for the last, at least the last 2 summers. We've had terrible summers as far as our weather goes. The biggest time of the year where we start seeing drought stress even on our Bermuda grass, there's two combinations. One is 95 degrees or higher, which of course we're going to have every summer. But when we have that in combination with, we start going more than 5 or 6 weeks without a drop of rain, that's when we start seeing stress in Bermuda. And where you'll see that stress is on your sprinkler system. Ideally, we would like to see what we call head-to-head coverage on the sprinklers, meaning every sprinkler hits the sprinkler beside it. So if we've got 4 sprinklers or 8 sprinklers, and we picked anywhere to stand in that lawn, we should get hit by 3 or 4 sprinklers, no matter where we stand. Inevitably, there's a weak area in the design, or a clogged nozzle, or heads that aren't popping up high enough, or leaning, and they're not getting that triple coverage from 3 or 4 sprinklers. When we get even like that little rain we had last night, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch of rain, that will hide those weak areas in your sprinkler system for 3 or 4 weeks. But when we start to get to that 5, 6, 7 weeks, you'll start seeing little areas of your lawn that don't look quite as well, and that's where most likely the sprinklers just aren't covering as well. Other biggies on sprinklers, most of us are not like that guy that's going to go resod his yard every 3 years. Most of us have some type of realistic budget. And when it comes to buying water now, our water's expensive and it adds up quick. So the big thing I say with that on the homeowner's part is a little bit of effort on your side can go a long ways. And think about what you're going to spend on watering for your yard as a yearly budget. Don't think about it as that 1 or 2 big water bills in the summertime. But take every opportunity to turn the sprinklers off when the weather's good. If we were just speaking purely agronomic, we would say water your yard once a week all winter long. But if we're talking about realistic for Abilene, Texas, I say as soon as we get our first freeze, turn the water off. Unless we go 6, 8 weeks without a drop of rain, leave it off all winter. And normally about right now, right around the middle of March, we would just now start turning it back on and watering probably 1 or 2 days a week, but not very long when we do water. But, anytime it rains, turn it off. Anytime the grass isn't, dormant, turn it off. And then when you get to July, August, and September, now maybe we've saved enough money during the off season that we can spend that extra money to pay for a little bit more water. Again, we work with many, many, many homeowners, and I can't tell you how many homeowners never touch their controller. It's running the same amount in January as it is in August. And in January, that's way too much water, and in August, it's not nearly enough water. So it does take a little bit of effort on your part. And I'll leave you with this on the irrigation, and we'll get back to the original topic. But a lot of these controllers nowadays have a button on the controller that says seasonal adjustment. Do any of y'all ever mess with your controllers much, change the times or the days or any of that? So, it's kind of confusing to go in there and change the run times or change your days and do all that kind of stuff. So seasonal adjustment, I tell everyone, that is your best friend. A lot of the new style sprinklers we have nowadays, as a general rule of thumb, 30 to 40 minutes is an average run time in the summertime for these new MP rotors that everybody has. If my seasonal adjustment if my controller set at 30 minutes, seasonal adjustment's at 100%, I'm watering 30 minutes. If it's fall or spring and I want to keep watering but not quite as much, turn the seasonal adjustment down to 50% or 20%. If I turn it to 50%, now instead of 30 minutes, it's only running 15 minutes. But it's one button that you can't really mess up. Because if you start changing days and you start changing run times, we get calls all the time, and Barbara, I'm going to pick on you. We get calls all the time. It's like, well, I was trying to set my controller, and now it's running 3 times a day, or whatever. So that seasonal adjustment is just a real easy way to make those adjustments. We'll get back on topic. Okay, so I kind of went with before you plant, preparations, things you can do. So now you've got your lawn or you've got your beds. By the way, are y'all interested? I mean, I meant to ask that when we started. Does the lawn weed control interest y'all, or is it more about beds, or a little bit of both? Is there anything in particular? All of the above? Okay. So we've got our lawn. We're growing grass. So, things we did before planting, trying to see where we're at here. Pre-emergent herbicides. So these are products that we're going to use to keep weeds from coming up. Not to be post-emergence, or where we're going to kind of finish our talk. That's what the products we're going to use to kill the weeds once they're already growing. But how do pre-emergents work? Because to know how to use a pre-emergent or when to apply a pre-emergent, it's important to understand how they work. I told a buddy of mine this years ago, and he was just like, I never thought, I had no idea. A lot of us are under the misconception of pre-emergent just doesn't let seed germinate, which is not true. The way pre-emergents work is the seed germinates, or at least all the pre-emergents that are available for home lawns, the seed germinates and starts to grow little bitty fibrous roots. And for lack of a better term, it just burns those new roots off. The big existing roots that are going through that barrier are not affected by pre-emergents. So that's how the pre-emergents keep weeds from growing. When you look at some weeds, grassier type weeds, pre-emergents are usually pretty good on. But when you have weeds that have the big single tap root, like we'll get to talking about khaki weed in a minute, I'm sure that's what everybody wants to know about, or in the summertime, spurge, anything that has that big single tap root, pre-emergents are not going to work that well on. Negative aspects of pre-emergence. Overdoing it can be bad, because if you do start to overdo your pre-emergence and you're getting that pre-emergent barrier thicker and thicker, you can start to adversely affect grass. Especially, you can tell them we'll pick on it all night long, St. Augustine. St. Augustine in our part of the world is just so weak, and it has such a shallow root system that the pre-emergence can be really hard on St. Augustine's. And I will talk about a pre-emergent that is, if you're going to pre-emerge St. Augustine, there's only one I would go with. If you do have areas that have been stressed, drought stressed, or some other issue that are trying to recover, pre-emergents are going to slow that. So a lot of times, especially at this time of the year, it's kind of a catch-22. Do I put out my pre-emergent and slow my grass recovery down that's trying to heal from the drought of last summer? Or do I not put out my pre-emergent and then have weeds because that same area is thinner and that's where all the weeds are coming up? It's a tough choice. And then anytime you've got newly sodded areas, just don't pre-emerge those until that sod's been established for probably about anywhere from 30 to 60 days. You don't want to be able to pull that sod up. If you can pick up the sod, you definitely don't want to be putting any pre-emergents out. So how effective are pre-emergents? In my experience, 60 to 70%, which is probably a lot less than most people think they work. So is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it, but because if you are reducing the population of weeds, it's helpful. But if you have 1,000 weeds in your lawn and I can reduce them 70%, you still got 300 weeds. The customer still may not be happy, but it is helpful. Best products or best pre-emergent products, and I'm going to talk about that one at the bottom here in a minute. That's the one I use. But we'll start with Dimension. These are kind of the big players in the game of pre-emergence. Dimension is probably the best product for the average homeowner. So the way those pre-emergents work by killing that new root growth, we call that root pruning. It's the least of the root pruners. Another benefit with Dimension's great on the St. Augustine too. Dimension also acts as a post-emergent on crabgrass if you have it down right as the crabgrass is coming up. So if you are just a hair late, a week or two late, it can even be a little bit helpful on crabgrass. Barricade is probably one of the longer lasting ones. Pendimethalin is probably a little bit better on broadleaf weeds. And then down at the bottom is Spectacle. I only brought this one up, A, because it's the one I use, and B, it is hands down the best pre-emergent ever made. I said that most pre-emergents are 60 to 70% effective. I think spectacle's about 90 to 95%. And you can buy a spectacle. If you see the price, it'll scare you away. It is a little bit more expensive. But the reason that I don't necessarily recommend it for the average homeowner is you have to put it out accurately. It is the one pre-emergent. If you put it out too heavy, you will kill your grass. Like, if you're guessing at how much to put out, don't use spectacle. Like, you need to know I've got 8,000 square foot. I need to put out 0.09 ounces per thousand, and I need to put out exactly the right amount. But if you do it and follow the label, it is the best pre-emergent on the market. Do not use it on anything except Bermuda grass. It'll smoke St. Augustine, it'll kill fescue, it'll kill zoysia. But that's one of the things that's been one of the hugest successes of our little business is on all of our Bermuda grass lawns we use spectacle, and it costs us more money up front, but it saves us so much money and headache from the weeds that are coming up. But you just have to really know what you're doing if you're going to use that one.
What about pet safe on any of those?
Pretty much any of these are going to, and even most post-emergents are safe as soon as they're dry on the plant. There's a few that have really where you get into more problem on being pet safe or kid safe is when you start to get into insecticides and fungicides. But for the most part, your herbicides are, I'm trying to think of one right now, and I can't even think of one that wouldn't be safe as soon as it's dry on the plant. And if you want to be extra cautious, you certainly, and you always want to water pre-emergent in relatively soon. I tell everybody it's 7 days or sooner. But if you want to really be safe, water it in, and then of course that pre-emergent has got to get down to the soil to form that barrier.
Okay.
But if I was, most of you, if I'm an average homeowner, Dimension, I'll go back. Dimension's probably my pick for the average homeowner. And with Dimension, I'm gonna make 3, if not 4 applications a year. I'm gonna be putting one out. I've already got one out right now. I'm going to put another one out May the 1st, and that's going to do us a pretty good job for most of our spring and summer weeds. And then I'm going to go September, and then if I have a lot of weed pressure, I'm probably going to go September and late October for those 4. Well, that kind of ties right in back to the timing of application. The biggie on pre-emergence is I would rather pre-emergent, the whole word is the first 3 letters, pre. I'd rather have my pre-emergent out a month too early than 2 days too late. To give you an idea, the spectacle's a little bit different. It only requires 2 applications a year. We apply our spectacle in January. We've been done for 4 weeks on our pre-emergence. Again, if I'm a little bit too early, no problem. But if I'm just a little bit too late, we've missed that window. Same thing when we get to the end of the year for my spectacle. I'm applying spectacle August 15th to September, the end of September. Most people don't even start till middle of September or end of September. So, but if in doubt on pre-emergent, go early. And I would also say in reverse of the spectacle, if you're using Dimension, Barricade, or pendimethalin, because they are only about 60 or 70% effective. If you're dealing with Bermuda grass, if I'm not sure how much to use, I'd go a little heavy, because it's not, it's much safer on the root zone than the spectacle is. So if in doubt, you can always go a little heavy, other than St. Augustine. So we've done all these things, we've thought about our plants, we've thought about our budgets, we've got our pre-emergent down, but we still have some weeds. Now what? So, kind of interesting, the profession I'm in now, I don't really think existed 30 years ago, because we all just went out and pulled weeds or chopped weeds. But that is, if you've got the time, it works, but it's not popular for most people. And then there's the organic approach, which can work again if you've got the time. But for the most part, you see a lot of things about vinegar and a lot of different witches' brews and things you can make. For the most part, those aren't really going to be what we call selective weed control, meaning they're not picking out a weed and killing a particular type of weed. you put any of those products on any plant, and it probably is going to kill any plant you put it on. So, if you feel good about organic, that's great, but it's really not, you're really just killing anything you're pouring it on. So then last is post-emergent. That's the term we use for products that kill weeds after they're already growing. And it is successful if you follow the label instructions. I can't stress enough, every bottle of any kind of herbicide that you buy has a label. Read it, and after you read 2 or 3 or 4 of them, you'll actually kind of learn. There's a whole bunch of junk in there you don't even need to look at. It's a lot of just regulatory stuff, but look at what kind of weeds they kill, look at what kind of plants they're safe to be used on. Look and see what the rates are, the mixing instructions. Should you use a surfactant? Should you not use a surfactant? If you don't remember what you read, set it down and pick it up tomorrow. But read the labels over and over and over and do it right. Lots and lots of folks say, well, so-and-so product didn't work or didn't kill these weeds or it killed my grass. And that can happen, but I would dare say that 90% of the time the problem wasn't with the product, it was with misapplication or misuse. So just understand what you're doing and read those labels.
Like you're dealing with Bermuda grass.
With what?
Bermuda grass. Nearly impossible to kill.
I got a product for you we'll talk about in a minute. It does take a few treatments though. So how do I pick the right product? If you start to think about it from the chemistry side, which is what these products are, we all think I want to buy this product to kill this weed. But the guys that are making these products, these chemists and things that are doing it, the way that they find these products is they're really finding a product that, let's just say if we have a Bermuda grass lawn, they're looking for products that Bermuda grass is not sensitive to. Because if Bermuda grass isn't sensitive to this product, but other plants are, hey, now I can sell that product for whatever that may be. But I've gotten to the point of looking how plants grow, when they're growing, what type of plant it is. I'll be honest with you, I'm probably not the strongest on weed identification. But I can look at a weed, see when it's growing, see its growth characteristics, and pick a product that's going to kill it just by knowing how it grows and when it's growing. Because the way these chemistries work, it all has to do with the growth habits of the plant, broadleaf, monocot, whatever it may be. So as far as identifying and picking my products, is it an annual or is it a perennial? This is kind of the first step in looking for products. But obviously an annual is any kind of weed or plant that grows, dies, and then comes back every year. Is everybody familiar with what khaki weed is? That's everybody's favorite weed to talk about right now. Is khaki weed a perennial or is it an annual?
Annual.
That's right.
Wait, which one?
Khaki, it's an annual. Yeah.
I say it's perennial.
The stickers are perennial. That's right. So then the next step is what kind of plant is it? Monocots are your grasses. If you look at a plant that's a monocot, all the veins in the leaves are running parallel with each other like my fingers. Broadleafs, they're spread out. So again, khaki weed, is it a monocot? Is it a grassy weed or is it a broadleaf weed? It's a broadleaf weed. Okay. And then when is it growing? Warm season, cool season. Just by answering these 3 questions, and as you kind of find some products that the reason by the way, we can talk about products here in a bit, but these manufacturers, they make this chemistry, and depending on what profession or what market you're in, they just put different names on them. So the products that I use may be the same products that you're going to go buy and use, but they're going to have a different name. The active ingredient, if you dig down that deep, that's where you'll see the link between things. But when you start to find products that work for you for whatever your particular weeds are, you'll start to be able to see other weeds that they'll work on as well if you've had success with the product. But warm season, cool season. As far as actually getting to, true hardcore weed identification, it's one of the, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the common weeds around here, but you've got tons and tons of ways to find it. I mean, hell, I've got an app on this phone where I can walk up and take a picture of a weed, and it'll tell me about 80% of the time what the weed is. I mean, it'll tell me 100%, but it's wrong 20%. But weed ID charts, there's all kinds of stuff on the internet, local extension services, this organization right here, online data. I mean, there's tons and tons of ways for you to, if you have some kind of plant growing in your yard and you really want to know what it is, there's lots of ways to find out how to identify the actual plant. But rules of thumb when it comes to post-emergent weed control as far as by lawn type or turf type. Bermuda grass lawns. There are tons and tons of great products for Bermuda, and for the most part, there's a couple of them. If you, again, read that label, like we happen to use, there's a broadleaf product we use that has an odd thing in its label. It says, do not use during spring transition. Y'all know what spring transition is? That's right now. That's when we're going from having dormant Bermuda to green Bermuda. From now till about the first part of May, we are in spring transition. It's a great product the rest of the year. That product's not going to kill that Bermuda, but it is going to ding it, and then you're going to see that. So, but Bermuda grass lawns, lots and lots and lots of good products. St. Augustine lawns. Again, I've harped on St. Augustine a bunch, and I'm not done yet. Do you know, how many of y'all have St. Augustine lawns, by the way? I should have. None? A little bit? Okay. St. Augustine is the one product I've actually been in it from the golf side. I know over the years I got to meet a lot of the manufacturing reps, the people that are making these products. And when I got into this business, St. Augustine in Abilene, Texas is so weak. We have a tight clay soil. It's all about how long. There's another rule of thumb about all plants. The longer the roots, the better the plant's going to be. St. Augustine, Abilene, Texas, you're lucky if you've got 1 inch to 2 inches of roots. There are a bunch of products that are labeled for use on St. Augustine that I've tried, and they hurt it. They damage it or even kill it. So if you are dealing with St. Augustine, just be very careful. Start at a light rate. Just spray a little bit. Don't go spray the whole yard. Zoysia grass, we talked about that a little bit. For the most part, I think just about any product that you can use on Bermuda grass is going to be safe on zoysia grass, so there's going to be a lot of choices there. Anybody here have fescue, by the way? That's one we haven't talked about yet. Oh, so you've got a lot of shade, don't you?
We do. We do. We're
Yep.
trying fescue, but it's not.
Yeah. I have tried, I'm always trying things. We've probably tried to convert 15 or 20 customers' lawns over to fescue, severe shade. And we've been successful on about 5.
Yeah.
Where fescue can really be, the biggest thing is back to the soil, but where fescue does have a shot is if you have deciduous trees, meaning trees that lose their leaves, fescue can really be a good answer. Because fescue is a cool season grass. It's green in the winter. So in the wintertime, which is the season it likes best anyways, it can get lots of sunlight, photosynthesize, build up carbohydrates. And then in the summer when it's under shade, extreme stress, it can kind of carry that over from the wintertime. So, but fescue under live oaks has not been very successful. Fescue under red oaks, somewhat successful. And if you do plant fescue, I'm sorry to harp, I think you're the only one working with it. But as a rule of thumb, if you're going to do fescue, reseed it every fall. It's kind of a maintenance plan. And then flower beds. Flower beds are one of the most difficult things on weed control. Most of the plants in your beds are dicots, meaning broadleafs. If the weeds you're trying to kill are broadleafs, there is no way chemically to kill a weed out of your shrub. So if you have a dandelion up underneath your shrub, don't try to spray it. You're just going to damage your shrub. If they're a few inches away, you can successfully spray those. But that's the challenge in flower beds is, You know, killing broadleafs out of the lawn is easy. Killing broadleafs out of the flower beds is next to impossible. If you've got an Asian jasmine flower bed, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The easy way to take care of broadleaf weeds in your flower beds is to not get them by using at least 4 inches of mulch.
There you go. Great. A very good point there. Yeah. He's putting so much mulch down that it actually has a very difficult time ever germinating and coming up through that. By the way, when it comes to mulches, that's a favorite topic. I really like the cypress mulches. If you have moving water, it's going to move it, but cypress mulch will not float. You can get it in different colors. It's pretty cheap. In fact, I was at Ewing Irrigation a couple days ago. They sell it for $3 a bag. It does take a lot of bags. But what's cool about the colors is they're going to lose their colors and get faded after about 3 or so years. But you don't have to replace it all. Just go buy a little bit of new and sprinkle it on top, and it looks good again. So I like the cypress. Do you agree? Do you use any cypress mulch?
I use just wood, basic wood chips.
Wood chips, yeah. Try the cypress sometime. I think you might like it. And it's kind of stringy and it kind of sticks together, so it holds in place really good. So now I'll actually talk a little bit about actual weed control or actual weed identification. The most common weed, in fact, I started thinking about this for this talk, dandelions. I think other than, I'm going to talk about a product here in a minute for Bermuda grass, I think every product I've ever read says it kills dandelions. They're really easy to kill. So dandelions, again, they're an annual, they're a broadleaf. They're going to grow in the spring and the fall. Pretty easy to control. Lots and lots of herbicides for dandelions. Here's one that right now everybody's talking about, henbit. But this is kind of a kind of a good topic with going back and kind of thinking about weed control, a different approach to weed control. If you've got henbit right now, you either did not pre-emerge last fall or you just totally missed the window so bad. But if you're not going to pre-emerge and you're going to go out here right now and try to kill henbit, that's fine. It's not, it's a little tough to kill, but it's not really that difficult to kill. But yes, ma'am?
Are those is that the?
That's the little purple flowers you see.
Little purple flowers?
Yep.
They're so cute.
Yep. See there? Henbit's not a weed to her. Really, but here's the, yeah. And like I said, if you like them, it's not a weed.
No,
But
they're pretty.
they're very pretty and they're thick and they spread everywhere. But here's the really kind of the thing to think about, kind of thinking outside the box about weed control in general. Okay, so right now, I make a ton of money right now off of henbit because it's driving everybody crazy. The grass isn't growing yet, the henbit's growing, you're not really mowing, the henbit sticks out like a sore thumb. But and by the way, henbit is going to die here in about another 4 to 6 weeks. Whether you spray it or not, it's all going to be dead. So if you're not going to change your practices, if you're not going to pre-emerge and try to grow a healthier lawn, why even worry about spraying henbit right now? It's going to all be dead in 4 weeks anyways, and if I spray it, it's going to take 2 weeks to die. So, I know it's a different approach, but sometimes we spend a whole lot of money and effort on things that really aren't going to make a big difference. But if we are going to go and change our maintenance practices on our lawn, put out pre-emergence at the right amount at the right time of the year, then yeah, I'm all about it. But if you're just worried about it after it comes up all the time, you're not ever going to get anywhere. Thistles, you'll see these a lot just about any time of the year, but especially in the summer months. Obviously a broadleaf, lots of products for broadleaves. Here's one right now you see quite a bit of called shepherd's purse. I've never really gotten shepherd's purse. It's called shepherd's purse. Y'all may not be able to see it back there, but they say the leaves looks like a lady's purse, but I've never been able to see that. But that's how you identify shepherd's purse. But again, it's another springtime annual broadleaf weed. By the way, just about any product that says broadleaf weed killer will kill any of these weeds that we've talked about so far.
Is that a sticker?
No, this one is not a sticker. Nope, nope. Right now you'll see it if you haven't mowed. It's got little white flowers on it. It'll be about yay tall. When you get it real bad, but it's actually not nearly as common as the henbit. You know, you see the henbit everywhere. But there's a fair amount of shepherd's purse around Abilene. Here's the khaki weed up close and personal. This is the one with the sticker on it. Yeah. It is a nasty thing. You know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't even have henbit in Abilene. I was still in the golf business at that time. And of course, we're a real tight-knit group, all the golf course superintendents, and all my buddies out in Midland and Odessa and Lubbock started talking about this khaki weed. I was like, I'd never even heard of khaki weed. We didn't have khaki weed. But when we got it, we really got it, and it spreads like wildfire. I think every one of those burrs, if I remember right, I think every one of those little burrs is 10 to 15 seeds. So, you know, there's a lot of seeds just in that little picture right there. But khaki weed is a summertime annual. The pre-emergents are not very successful on khaki weed because it does just have a single taproot. So pre-emergents are helpful, but not as much as some of the other weeds. But here's one you'll want to write down if you do have khaki weed problems. There's a product you can buy that we have found that works extremely well. Can y'all read it from that far back? These are a couple of the trade names you'll see. It's either called Manor, M-A-N-O-R, or MSM 60. If you don't find one of those two names, if you look under the active ingredients, that active ingredient is called metsulfuron. I'm a big fan of what's called sulfonated ureas. This is in that family of chemistry. We use a lot of sulfonated ureas. But metsulfuron is absolute death to khaki weed. You spray it one time and it's dead. It's amazing. And they sell it, probably Jackson Brothers may be a good place to buy it. It's a dry product. It comes in an 8-ounce bottle that's about this tall. So that's 8 ounces. You know, that's one thing, these sulfonated ureas, they're all dry products. So a big part of our cost with everything we do is freight, shipping this stuff back and forth across the country so we can get it. Comes in an 8-ounce bottle. I think it's going to cost you $60 or $70. But the rate is half an ounce per acre. So again, read the label, and you'll have to find you some type of little bitty, you know, a fourth of a teaspoon for a 4-gallon backpack sprayer. I mean, that, in other words, that 8-ounce bottle treats 16 acres. It's actually, it may be cheaper than the water that we're spraying with it. It's really a cheap product. But, and it's not very, it does have a lot of weeds on the label. It does have some other broadleafs it does okay on. It's really not that great of a product for a bunch of different kinds of weeds, but it is absolutely the bomb for khaki weed. Do be careful underneath trees. If you're underneath a bunch of big trees, just spot it and keep it really light. It is a little, anytime you're killing a broadleaf weed, just like those flower beds, anytime you're killing broadleaf weeds, that product does have the potential to harm your trees. So just keep things light underneath the drip line of a tree. But this was a huge thing when we found this product. Like I said, khaki weed really doesn't bother us too bad anymore. This is a bad one on our golf course days, and you'll see this in some home lawns. This is called annual bluegrass. It's a wintertime annual, so it's a cool season grass. In Bermuda grass, piece of cake to take care of. It comes up from seed every year. The reason I had to put this one in here is just from my golf course days. If anybody in here ever plays golf, golfers love to talk about a weed in the greens called POA. This is it. And if you have a bent grass green, there is no way to kill this weed. We had to replace all the greens at Fairway Oaks right as I was leaving, and they need to do Abilene Country Club now just because of this weed. But in Bermuda grass, it's a piece of cake. Oh, I missed something there. Nutgrass. There's another one. So nutgrass is kind of the exception to the rule. It's actually called sedge. It's not truly a monocot. We call it nutgrass because it has little nutlets down on those roots, or tubers down on those roots. This is the one weed that I warn people, don't pull it. If you pull it, unless you found some magical way to get all of that root out, which I think is just almost impossible, you'll break that root off and 3 more will come up, okay?
So how do you get nutgrass?
If I knew that, I'd probably have my own island in the Caribbean somewhere. So nutgrass is, I don't know how, if you disturb soil, like if you have new construction or, out at the country club, we could have a leak, fix a leak, the golf course has been there for 80 years, dig a hole, fix the leak, take the soil, put the same soil back in, we cut the sod off the top, take the same sod, put it back in, and nutgrass will come up. I don't know how it does it.
It did. I bought some potting soil, put it in there's nothing in there.
And it grow. There's something about it must be in the air. I'm telling you, if you ever disturb soil, nutgrass comes up without even putting new soil there. Even these last 2 summers, where we've had a couple stretches of this 12 to 15 weeks without a drop of rain, and all of a sudden we get 3 inches in a day, nutgrass comes up. I don't know how it does it, but it does. There are several products you'll find. I don't know if I may not have that on here. They're called Sedgehammer. It's a real popular product. That's one, by the way. By the way, you can kill nutgrass out of your flower beds also without hurting your plants. But here's what we see and I warn our customers about this. When we spray nutgrass, we're going to spray it. It's going to die in about 3 weeks, and it's going to go away. The way our program works is we come to your house every 8 weeks. When we come back for the next visit, there probably won't be any. But when we come back for that 3rd visit, here it comes again. And you've got to go through that cycle 3 or 4 times, and then it'll finally give up. And then lo and behold, we'll have it under control for several years. I think those nutlets can sit in the ground for 4 or 5 years and then come up. But they will come up for no apparent reason. We have a lot of people that'll have a landscaper come in and lay sod in the yard, and nutgrass comes up, and they're like, that sod was full of nutgrass. It just has a way of coming up.
Can I ask?
Sure.
So, all right, so let's say your yard is beautiful because it's nothing but weeds, and people drive by 40 miles an hour. They're not worried if it's bluegrass or,
That's right.
or weeds.
Yep.
Okay, so if you mow the grass, if you mow the nuts grass, does it multiply?
I don't.
By mowing the nut grass, does it multiply?
I don't think so. In theory, yes. Same way with grass burrs. I live out at Clyde, and we've got grass burrs really bad. I think that may be our next slide. We talk about all the time about, bagging our clippings to not have as many weed seeds. Back when my kids were little, we used to drag carpet and bag and everything on the baseball fields because, our kids in Clyde literally grew up playing baseball in a sticker patch. And in theory, bagging clippings may help. In theory, mowing may hurt. I've never been able to see it make a difference enough I could tell a difference.
So, okay, see, I mow my next door neighbor's yard, and the next door neighbor's yard, guess what he's got?
Oh, yeah.
Nut grass.
So are you worried about tracking it into your lawn?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
in 30
yeah.
years, I've never had a nut grass.
Yeah.
So how do you clean your lawn? Can you just clean the underside of it?
Yeah, I would just be washing it off or blowing it off. If you got a blower or air hose or something would be the best thing. But at the end of the day, what you've done somehow is kind of what I've tried to tip on for the most of this talk. You're mowing 2 of your neighbors' lawns,
Yeah.
and you don't have the weeds. Whatever you're doing, don't change it, because it's good. Really, you're doing something. It may be better watering, whatever it may be, maybe you don't, but whatever it is, don't change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, Because the best way to keep weed, I mean, the number one way to keep weeds out alone is grow thick grass, grow healthy grass. So, but yeah, grass burrs. Does anybody deal with grass burrs? Okay. Okay, well, you didn't hear this from me. There's a weird thing. There is a product out there that has been banned, and it was banned, I'm going to say 15 years ago, but it's called MSMA. I'll say it because you can go buy it on Amazon. And again, I'm going to say a lot of things that may not be politically correct or correct at all, but in my experience, this is just what I've seen. I think the EPA banned this product, and then they said, we shouldn't have banned it, but we're not going to say we made a mistake. So it's okay for people to sell it. It's just not okay for people to use it. It's the craziest thing ever. It's still, like it is legal to use on golf courses. The reason it's legal on golf courses is golf courses have a whole bunch of money, and we pay a whole bunch of lobbyists to go to Congress and make sure it didn't get banned for us. That's why it's legal on golf courses. But you can buy MSMA on Amazon. It's not legal for you to use it, but who's going to know? That's your choice, though. I will tell you, I can't use it because if I get caught with it, I'm out of business, so I really can't use it. But MSMA, it'll be called Target MSMA. And the interesting thing about that product, if you read the label, that is different than most any other product you'll ever see, the hotter it is, the better it works. Most herbicides say don't use above 85 degrees or don't use above 90 degrees. I think you're supposed to use this only when it's above 85 degrees. But it's a good grassy weed herbicide. It's not going to kill any of the broadleafs, but it's a pretty good herbicide for grassy weeds.
What was the reason for it being banned?
So MSMA stands for, it's got the word arsenic in it. That's what scares everybody. So what got it banned was, this is the things you get to learn when you work in golf courses. Arsenic naturally occurs in our soil. You can test soils in different parts of our country and you're going to find arsenic. I think it was somewhere in Maine or somewhere up on the northeastern coast, they found arsenic in some groundwater. And they actually know, they've proven that it wasn't synthetic, which means it wasn't man-made, it was naturally occurring, but it got pinned on MSMA. And once that ball gets rolling, you can't stop it after the lawyers get a hold of it. By the way, I hope it's not too touchy, but same way with, you've heard a lot about Roundup in the last 4 or 5 years. What you're not hearing about Roundup, first off, there have been more people use Roundup than any other herbicide we've ever had to work with. And if you're exposed to anything enough, there are risks involved. But what you're not hearing about, the company that made Roundup was called Monsanto. Bayer, just like Bayer aspirin. Bayer bought the Roundup trade name and ingredients about 3 years ago. And what you're not hearing about is now Bayer's starting to win all those lawsuits. But you don't see advertisements about Bayer winning the lawsuits. You just see the advertisements from the lawyers who are trying to get everybody to go have a lawsuit. So I'm sure there's issues there, and you've got to be safe. You've got to wear the right protective equipment. But there's just a lot of things we don't really hear about. Bermuda grass and flower beds. There is a product called Fusilade, or you may see it called Fusilade 2, Fusilade Plus. I can't remember that exact active ingredient if you don't find Fusilade, but the active ingredient name will have something in that wording that is very similar to Fusilade. Fusilade will only kill Bermuda grass.
Is that called over the top?
It could be. Yep. It could be. If you look in that active ingredient, there's probably a scientific word that looks like that in there. And I don't even think Fusilade will kill St. Augustine. Everything else will, but Fusilade won't. But it is going to take you several applications. Okay, it's not just a one-time kill like the khaki weed was. But if you go out here and spray your flower beds every 4 to 6 weeks with Fusilade, you won't have any Bermuda. You will deal with it again down the road because, again, you've got this magic line right here where Bermuda grass is, we want it to grow, and then it crosses that line and it becomes a weed, so it's always going to be invading. But you can take, and you can spray it right over the top of your shrubs, and it won't hurt your shrubs. Same way with some nutgrass products. We were talking about the nut sedge a while ago. One's called Pro Sedge, one's called Sedge Hammer. They're very safe for your plants also.
That thing that you spray it on your flower beds, can you go ahead and spray that on your vegetable beds?
On your what?
Vegetable beds?
You'll have to read the label. Personally, if I'm going to eat it, I don't spray anything on it. Like I said, I'm pretty pro-chemical. I don't have an issue with Roundup or those type things, but if it's a vegetable garden, I'm not going to spray anything on my vegetables and eat them.
Can you do it on the actual plant, or can you do it on the ground?
I wouldn't spray it anywhere around the plants, even on the ground, because a lot of these products can be root absorbed. Yeah, personally, I would not. Yeah. Mhm.
Before we get too far,
Sure.
I read it and I forget. Back to the grass burr.
Yeah.
That MSMA, is that the only thing that you recommend?
For post-emergent. You will have, I'm glad you brought that up.
Keep up with them. We live in the-
Okay, well, for what it's worth, last year was the worst year I've ever seen for grass burrs. I don't know what happened, and they stayed green all the way through September, which was also really weird. Pre-emergents are pretty helpful. Magic dates, kind of like that dimension I was talking about a while ago, March 15th, May 1st. 2 applications. If grass burr, again, this is just kind of that approach to weed control. If grass burrs is my problem, I'm not worried about fall pre-emergence. I'm not worried about henbit or anything else in the wintertime. I'm just worried about grass burrs, if that's my only fear. Pre-emergence in the spring, 2 applications is pretty darn helpful. Another thing on grass burrs, that if you ever talk to any of these old farmers or ranchers, they'll tell you that they think fertilizer kills them. And I don't think fertilizer kills them, but fertilizer definitely helps the Bermuda grass outcompete them. So a great thing to do, how much, do you have a very big area, or is it just
We
a?
live in the country, we don't even have
What?
like lawn kind of stuff.
Okay, yeah. So it's kind of just deciding how much you're going to, how much you're going to treat. But if it's call it 10, okay, 20,000 square foot. Go down to Jackson Brothers and get Dimension on a granular fertilizer. Yeah, you could treat it. You could treat a half acre with a spray. It'd be big, but it's very doable for sure. And then, like I said, especially if you come back in early May with that second dose of Dimension. By the way, when you buy pre-emergents, these are little things that I just assume people know, but maybe I think a lot of people don't. When you buy pre-emergent for a home lawn, usually it's on a granular so that you can put it out with your spreader. The only reason it's on a granular is so you can put it out with a spreader, because most homeowners don't have the ability to spray accurately. So if you have the ability to spray accurately, by all means, you could spray it, and it's a whole lot cheaper and probably will work a little bit better. If you think about it, if I'm spreading a pre-emergent on these granulars and they hit the ground, how far apart are the granulars? If I'm putting it out really heavy, I may get them where it's a ½ inch in between each piece of fertilizer. So when that gets watered in, that pre-emergent has to travel that distance to fill in those gaps. But if I'm spraying, and when we calibrate our spray equipment, we'll calibrate it across a concrete driveway just to see the spray pattern. Those drops are an 1/8 of an inch apart, and so that's one of the reasons spraying is always a little bit more effective when it comes to herbicides.
So does spraying last as long as granules do? Do they work as long?
Oh yeah, it's the same product. Like I said, all they're doing, when you're buying a pre-emergent on the granular, they're just finding something solid to put it on so you can use a push spreader. But there's nothing wrong with it. By all means, it's the easiest way for most homeowners to use it. But yeah. But like I said, when you go back with that Dimension in May for those grass burrs, you can change how much the first number on your fertilizer bag is nitrogen. That's primarily has to do with your growth of your grass, or how fast, top growth. Get a higher nitrogen content, And that may be a double benefit for you. You're getting some fertilizer out as well as the pre-emergent at the same time. And then, the grass burrs will start growing. They actually start germinating in March and April, but they're really hard to see until you get to late May or June when they start putting they start blooming, and then they start to put the grass burrs on them, through the rest of the summer. But yeah, last year was a terrible year for grass burrs. Worst I've ever seen, I think. This is my, of all the weeds, this is my least favorite weed. Does anybody know what blue stem is here, or any of these native grasses? KR blue stem. You know what KR stands for? Yeah. Thank you, King Ranch. Yep. Yeah, it's great for cattle. It's really great. It's not a weed for them at all. They love it. We start getting phone calls about, and there's several other native grasses. Some of them, there's about 6 or 8 different ones, and I can't even identify them all. But especially when we get out here south of town, especially if you go out Oldham Lane, between the edge of town and Potosi, all the pack saddle neighborhoods out there, this is a terrible, terrible one. The challenge with this weed is, all summer long, it is clumpy. You can tell the difference, but a lot of people don't even know they've got blue stem. And then lo and behold, about the end of August, the phone starts ringing because they've got this weird weed growing in the yard. Then when they go mow the yard, 3 days later, there's these stems sticking up that's this tall. It's been there all year. It's a perennial. So that's again, when you start looking at products, Bermuda grass is a warm season perennial grass. Blue stem is a warm season perennial grass. They are so identical to each other, it is very, very, very difficult to get rid of it. I do have a little witch's brew that we've concocted that we've been able to get rid of it after about 2 years of treating a yard. But it is really, really tough to get rid of. But that's, I think that may be it. Yep. Hope I didn't bore you guys too bad. Is there any other questions or anything I didn't cover that maybe you'd like to? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I am one of those that I try to, and I wonder sometimes, every once in a while, we have that long tap root, and sometimes a little piece breaks. Will that?
Depending on the weed, it could come back on you, depending on what kind of weed it is. But for the most part, it should work pretty good. And by the way, I don't even mean to, as far as being a weed puller. Like I said, 30 years ago, what I do for a living now did not exist, because if you have the, what would be the right word? If you're, our society, we're lazy. But if you go out in your yard and work 15 minutes a day, 3 days a week, popping weeds up, you probably wouldn't have any weeds. But most of us just aren't that dedicated. Today's a different world. But like I said, my parents, my grandparents, they had beautiful lawns and they never sprayed any kind of herbicides. That's right. That's how I ended up doing what I'm doing.
How about like irrigating? How often should you do that, or,
Well, that's going to be a good. Probably aerifying. Yep. So aerifying is beneficial. It is not a silver bullet. I don't think in most situations, it depends on your situation, but in most situations, I don't think you're going, is it beneficial? Yes, no doubt. Is it beneficial enough you're going to see a difference? I doubt it. It does help. It breaks the soil up, but it just compacts again pretty quick. Where aerification is very beneficial, high traffic areas, golf courses, football fields, baseball fields. If you've got pets and kids, those are a little more high traffic areas. But for the average homeowner, there's no, one of the things, anytime you do anything to a lawn is say, okay, pros and cons. The only negative to aerification is you might break a sprinkler line or maybe the cable, the internet line. But other than that, aerification is 100% beneficial. So and that's important. There's a lot of things as you're weighing options on what to do. Sometimes the pros don't outweigh the cons, but aerification is good, but in most cases, I don't think most people ever see the difference.
well, see, my thought was that when you aerate, it would help for the pre-emergence or the post-emergence to get any?
It actually doesn't help the pre-emergence any. In fact, if you aerate after you pre-emerge, it'll ruin it because that pre-emergent needs to not be disturbed. But what it does help is it does help moisture and fertilizer get down in there, and it helps hold moisture a lot better. But the benefits in our soil are so short-lived. I mean, I don't want to discourage you from aerifying, but it's, I don't know if you'll see a difference or not. Yeah. Compost, throwing a good compost soil on top is very beneficial. I'd probably do that before I would aerify. Just get some kind of good topsoil, composted soil to spread or top dress with.
Have you ever opened some of these bags of good grade topsoil? You can't even take a pickaxe to.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Trash.
Yeah.
Can I ask that, where would you get it from here?
I think that one of the best sources is Willow Creek Gardens on Treadaway.
Make your own.
Yeah, make your own, or they sell a lot of that stuff in bulk, if you've got a way to haul stuff in bulk. So, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So are goat heads, is that a broadleaf? I get rid of those.
That is a broadleaf, and that's a good one that is not as common around here, but yeah, it's called puncture vine, and that is a broadleaf. There's another weed growing right now called fillery that looks almost identical, but yeah, goat heads, that is a broadleaf, and again, it's got that single taproot. So single taproot means pre-emergent's probably not going to work all that well, but any what you see broadleaf weed killer, a lot of your broadleaf weed killers are going to be called three-ways. There's 5 different products, and they'll use 3 out of those 5, and there's just a whole plethora of 3-way broadleaf weed killers, and that'll kill your goat heads really good. But yeah, goat heads will kind of have a ferny type look, like a fern laying on the ground. That's kind of what a goat head will look like. Okay.